And welcome back to our Midnight Magic Musings channel. I am your humble host. I'm the Lord Cephas, but unfortunately tonight I'm flying solo. I say I'm flying Han Solo because the Earl of Florida is not going to be here with us tonight. Unfortunately, the Earl is under the weather. He's not been feeling well the last couple of days. So we talked this afternoon. I just suggest that he continue to get fluids, continue to rest, and hopefully get back on his feet. So for tonight, it's a special episode. It's Midnight Magic Musings. It's episode 22. We're very grateful that we've been able to be live the last couple of weeks. But for this week, due to scheduling purposes, with him not feeling well, me traveling on the road, being out of state, we just decided to do a recording here just to share some thoughts with you. We'll come back together hopefully live next week. Well, since you're here, since you're listening to this, could you do us a favor? Could you click like on this? It really does help us. If you're not subscribed to our YouTube channel, we'd really appreciate it. You consider clicking the subscribe button. Not only like, not only subscribe, excuse me, but share this sucker out. Share it out on social media. If you like what we do, if you appreciate the content that we provide, if you just think we're ridiculous and you want other people to know that there are ridiculous people like us out in the world, we absolutely appreciate it. From our dumb dad jokes that we upload pretty much every single morning to the Earl of Florida's Watcher Files, where I never know what video he's watching and what he's going to say. I don't think he knows what he's going to say until it actually comes out of his mouth. To our Midnight Magic Musings, our mothership, our flagship show here on the Midnight Magic Musings channel. We do appreciate everyone sharing with that. Leave a comment also, if you would, before you head out to go about your day, because that really does help us in the YouTube algorithm. But much more than that, we enjoy the interaction, the feedback that we get from everyone. I checked tonight before I went on the air, and we have, I think, just under 100 subscribers. So don't worry, when we hit the 100, not only will you hear about it, there'll probably be some insane celebration because we're very grateful for each and every one of you that joins us every week or that joins us every day or periodically throughout the week. Again, we thank you so much for your support. It means an awful lot to us. All right, well, let's get into our topics this week. Again, it's going to be an abbreviated version of Midnight Magic Music, but I did want to share a few thoughts with you. And the first one is going to be Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Now, if you've listened the last couple of weeks, you'll be familiar that the Earl and I often make jokes at one another about who's the best prognosticator, who can pick better than the other. Well, unfortunately, I won the Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania prognostication because I said it would make under 700 million. In fact, it was well off 100 to 130 million less than that number. And so, unfortunately, I was right on that one. Didn't think the movie was terrible. It just didn't work for people. Enough people didn't go out and see it. Well, as you've been studying the tracking coming up to Guardians of the Galaxy Volume Three's release, these numbers are tracking very low. The day of the release, of the Thursday release, there was talk it may come in right at Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania numbers, which, if you remember, back in in February rather, it was about $108 million, which was unheard of domestically for a Marvel release. People were panicking, they were wringing their hands. It massively underperformed. It did not open in China. It did not get that support. So globally, it was not a success. And so here's Guardians Volume 3. That's getting a lot of that very same talk. And the first weekend, honestly, wasn't that great domestically. 118 million. Well, that's 10 million more than Ant-Man and the Wasp made. It sounds like a good opening for any other movie. That would be great. But on a budget of $250 million, that means you need $750 million just to break even. And that's assuming we're not counting budgeting for marketing purposes. So we'll say the 250. So we always say you got to make two times whatever it costs. So if it's 250, 250 and 250 is 500. Add on another 250 to be two times. That's going to be your 750. So it's a 2x multiplier. After the first weekend, it wasn't looking so good. And going into this past weekend, there wasn't a tremendous amount of competition, but the Marvel franchises tend to, post Endgame, hit really high numbers the first weekend and then have a precipitous drop. I believe it was Thor Love and Thunder had like a 70% drop from week 1 to week 2. And there were predictions that, you know what, we're probably going to have a very similar number. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, though, defied the odds. In fact, they had a 49% drop from week 1 to week 2. That may sound like a huge number. It's a good sized number. It's almost 50%. But it's 20% less than what Thor Love and Thunder did. So for Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, that has got to be considered a victory. They had $60 million at the box office last weekend domestically. They also did well overseas, really bolstered by China. And so what we see right now, they are over $500 million at the time of this recording, is where that number actually is. It's about $540 million. It's a big number globally. But remember, the end game, no pun intended, is to get to 750 million. Now, I suspect this weekend, we'll talk about Fast X coming up here in just a little bit. My suspicion is Guardians is going to drop off a lot of those PLFs. Those are those primary screens, those premium live viewing seats, and the screens on it. You're going to lose a lot of those. Fast X is going to boot those out. So what does that mean? Well, typically those seats cost more money at the theater. So that is going to be less revenue that Guardians is going to have access to because as new movies come out, the older ones step aside a little bit. However, it's going to be very interesting this week to see, okay, how does Guardians hold against a very strong movie? Now, is it going to hold at the 50% drop? That would actually be a really good number. That would be an additional 30 million. Let's say they hit and they do well, and let's say they get 40 or 50 million. They make a several million between now and Friday. If we record this on Wednesday, let's say they get to 600 million by the end of the weekend. Great number. Problem is, they're still 150 million off of where they need to be. Now, can this thing have legs and be out there all during the summer? I believe it can. Because a big thing that helped Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 is word of mouth. There was not a ton of positivity going into that first weekend, but coming out of the first weekend, and we saw polls that talked about this, we've heard fans talk about it. When they left, they started telling everybody, hey, this is a really good movie. It may not be quite as great as number one, but it's really, really good. Probably better than two, although two had its emotional moments. I enjoyed that tremendously as well. And so now we're starting to see more and more people go out to it. So we're going to see, can Guardians hold strong this weekend? I don't know. But regardless of whether they hold strong or not, the real question is, what kind of legs is this thing going to have? Is it going to be able to compete week after week after week? Because you got to remember, on the other side of Fast X, you've got a Mission Impossible movie. You've got an Indiana Jones movie. You've got a Little Mermaid movie coming next week, next weekend. You've got a Transformers movie that's going to be come out. You've got a Flash movie that's coming out, and all those movies are going to be pulling against one another, which means the shelf life for Guardians, unfortunately, begins to shrink. And so, what we'll do is we'll check the numbers into this weekend and just see how did Guardians do. Did it hold at about that 50% drop, which again would be a great number for them going into week number 3? And then the other question we'll be asking next week is what is the total global haul? What is the total cum for this movie, both domestically and foreign? The truth of the matter is, the foreign box office has really helped Guardians in its second week. So we'll see how well it plays in other countries, how well it plays domestically here back home. All right, let's go on to subject number 2, and that is the aforementioned Fast X Facts and the Furious number 10. Now, if you think about it, you can count on one hand how many movies have had 10 different entries. I'm thinking, what, Friday the 13th has had 10 entries. I think when you add them all up, I think Nightmare on Elm Street is at 9 or 10. They've had that many. But there haven't been a tremendous amount of movies that have reached 10 movies in a franchise. So Fast X is certainly one of the few that can claim that. Looking at the long range tracking, it's looking at about a $70 million opening in terms of this weekend. Really, it hit its zenith probably around probably Fast 7 is where it made its most money. And since then, it's come down incrementally for Fast 8 and Fast 9. But I think it will do okay. But the thing to watch for Fast X is how does it do internationally? How well does it do in China? Because honestly, it does really, really well in some of these other countries. It'll have 70% of its box office revenue oftentimes come from these other locations. So this movie is built for domestic audiences, obviously, but the last 3 to 5 Fast movies have done far better overseas than they have done here domestically. So that's going to be very interesting to see how the numbers turn out. I think that Fast X will be the number one movie at the end of the weekend. I don't think Guardians will hold the spot. I think it will earn that with a probably a clear cut victory over the weekend. But again, 70 million to start is good for that franchise, but this is one expensive movie. This thing's going to have legs for like 3 months to break even. But it's not always about breaking even for every franchise. If you remember, uh, 2 years ago, we had a Jurassic Park movie, the final one. It did okay. It made money. It broke even. But you know where it made its most money? Merchandising. To quote Mel Brooks in Spaceballs, merchandising, merchandising, right? He was Yogurt the All Wise. They do so much business with the Jurassic Park label on things that it behooves them, no pun intended, to get those movies out there. You've got the movie franchise. You've got a cartoon franchise that has been on Netflix. It's a constant churn of product. And by the way, they turn out stuff even when there are no movies and are no new animated episodes of a series. They're still selling stuff. I went to the grocery store tonight to pick up a few items. In the grocery store, in the toy aisle, there's a whole section of Jurassic Park toys. And by the way, it wasn't a full shelf. People have been buying those things off the shelf. And Fast X falls in that as well. They have some vehicles that have been released lately. They have some figures that have been released. We'll see how well they do. But again, it seems to be a vibrant product. Now, allegedly, this was going to be the final movie. Now, I'm not going to give any spoilers away, but there's something in the movie, perhaps, I don't know, a post-credit scene that kind of calls that particular statement that this is the end of the franchise, kind of calls that into question because if something happens. I won't spoil it for you. Stay off the internet. If you're going to go see the movie, just go enjoy it just the way it is. But it certainly makes you go, maybe there is still life in this franchise, or maybe they're going to try and wring some more life out of the franchise. Again, I think it'll do well. You have most of the cast has been in it through the years will return. Even John Cena, who was in Fast Nine, is going to be back as well. The Earl and I have a wrestling show that we do here on YouTube, and so we'll be watching, if nothing else, for that to see his performance. Jason Momoa is to be the bad guy in the movie. I understand he's just out of control in an over the top kind of way. I think that'll be very interesting. But again, that plays very well to the type of movie that it is. It plays well to the fan base. And we talk about on this program all the time, if you give the fans what they want, they'll keep coming back. We've seen that with Guardians, and I think we'll see that with Fast X. But again, it's going to be interesting to see how do they actually do this weekend. How high is the number? And then as these other summer blockbuster movies begin to come out, we're going to be asking ourselves, what kind of legs does this have? So you have Guardians. We're going to be tracking how long it can hold on, how much it can leg out. We'll also be doing the same with Fast X because, again, next week comes The Little Mermaid, and then pretty much every week after that, there is some type of movie that's going to be released that, again, it's going to draw against these other movies. That's one of the issues that Disney has right now is they've got a ton of movies coming out on the slate, from animated to live action remakes to obviously they got superhero stuff going on. Indiana Jones, technically Lucasfilm, but still under the Disney umbrella. It's going to be interesting to see how they do in this quarter, especially coming off of a conference call where they talked about losing more subscribers with Disney Plus and talking about they were going to purge some content from Disney Plus. And that actually leads us into our Triple M overtime. Now, this is the chance for me to talk about stuff that might seem a little random or things that didn't really earn a topic all to themselves, but just some things I want to touch on. And I want to start with that. I want to start with the Disney Plus with the conference call. Again, losing money, losing subscribers. It's just not generating what they need. And so, again, Iger talked about, we're going to limit the amount of content that we release. But I want to ask you a question. If you just limit the amount of content that you have, doesn't that pull against your ability to draw in new subscribers? Because basically, if all you're doing is releasing one or two series a year, and I'm not saying that's what they're going to do, but let's just play with that for a minute, then people are only going to subscribe once or twice a year. Now, if you drop everything at one time, they'll go ahead and they'll just binge it and they'll be done. For example, they're going to do that with the Echo series, which is a character coming out of the Hawkeye mini series they had a couple of years ago that came out right around Thanksgiving. That's going to come out again roughly about the same time, trying to get some synergy with that. But that series is going to drop completely So we're told at that time. Don't know how well that one's going to go. Echo is not a big character. She was just introduced in the Hawkeye series, and how well will that resonate with the audience? We're going to see. And again, that's going to be a test of how is the fan base? Do you just roll it out and everybody goes to watch it because it's Marvel? Or is the fan base starting to say, we'll just see what the reviews are? Because that can be a really good thing. That can be a really bad thing. Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania did not have good reviews. It was the first Marvel movie in forever that had really poor reviews. And look, that word got out there. And I think that's part of the reason some people didn't go. I think part of it is there's some superhero fatigue, but I think part of that superhero fatigue is the fact that, you've got to make good stuff that people want to go see. If you don't, they're less likely to spend their money, especially as prices go up, less people are going to go. If I have a theater in my home, which I wish I did, but I don't, if I can stream it on my television or something, I'm more tempted to just stay home instead of spending the $100 in tickets to take my family out to do it. And we haven't even touched popcorn, drinks, or the 57 snacks each one of them is going to want. And so Disney Plus is going to cull from their offerings, things they're no longer going to have there. They're also going to be dropping Low-Key a little bit later in the summertime. I believe that one is going to be a weekly release, not all dropped at one time. So we'll see how that works in terms of does that draw eyeballs to it. Remember, it's very popular when it aired previously. It introduced the idea of the multiverse, of the variants of Kang. We saw that carried over in the Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. We'll see how the multiverse, the kind of legs that it has. We have seen in the past is sometimes the multiverse kind of leads to people checking out. If you're a fan of the Flash TV series, which we are unabashedly here, I am an unabashed supporter of Grant Gustin. I want him to be the Flash in the movies. They've done a lot of multiverse stories, whether with the crossovers with Arrow and Supergirl and Legends of Tomorrow, or just sort of multiverse with him having to fix things he caused or having to run backwards in time to do all those things. If you don't follow that show every single week, and storytelling as the show's gone on has not been as strong as it was when it first started. It's very difficult to follow the multiverse, and people are confused. If they miss an episode or two and someone's there that was killed off last season, they have no idea why they're there. They don't know that they're from Earth um, 86 or whatever it is that DC is going to call it. So it's very confusing for them. I would argue that since Marvel has pretty much decided they're going to go cosmic, and by cosmic, I mean they're going to pull in the multiverse, you have to be careful with it. It can become a storytelling crutch. And so it's going to be interesting to see how season two of Loki really works. The first one I thought was good. I thought there was a little too much in the words of Owen Wilson, talkie, 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 talkie. But I thought overall the season was good. Now we'll see what comes back with season two. What will they do now? And now that he who remains apparently no longer remains, but he kind of does. And that's going to be the kind of stuff that people need clarification on so they can understand what exactly is going on. And so the House of Mouse continues to struggle with their streaming options. They're talking about merging Disney Plus with a Hulu option in an app where you have both of them together. Not sure how that's going to work, but it's going to be very interesting to see what exactly it is they do. All right. Well, I've got a couple of other notes here for Midnight Magic Movies Overtime. One of them, this one hits me where I live because I travel a lot for work, and I don't like to stream on my phone all the time. I'd rather have the radio playing, hear what's going on locally. Ford announced that they are no longer going to be carrying AM as a dial destination in their new vehicles. Now, you may never listen to the AM stations. That's perfectly fine. But I remember being a little boy laying in my bed, having the radio on, and I'm a sports guy. And I would listen to the AM stations. And, in the summertime, if the wind was blowing just right and the weather was good, I could pick up other stations. Sometimes I could pick up WLW, which is out of Cincinnati. You could hear the Cincinnati Reds play, or you could have a team from that particular area. Maybe I was listening to the station out of New Orleans because my radio would pick that up sometimes late at night as well. So I could pick up different radio stations. I could pick up WSB out of Atlanta, 750, right? So these stations, these call letters, these call numbers are just kind of burned into my brain. It's kind of sad as you get older when you start losing some of the things that you just kind of took for granted and that you loved. But yeah, Ford is not going to have AM radio stations in their vehicles going forward. There is actually a bill in Congress to not allow them to do with AM stations. AM stations typically do not have the loudest broadcast frequency. In other words, you can't always hear them from a distance as well as you can an FM station. And so there is a push on to save AM stations. I just find that interesting for forms of entertainment. Just something that I'm keeping my eye on. If it's nothing just but for nostalgia's sake, we're taking a look at that. I've got one more for you, and that is Eddie Murphy is rumored to be in talks to join a new Pink Panther movie. Now, if he were to join the Pink Panther movie, it would be as Inspector Clouseau. Now, for those of you that are only familiar with the Pink Panther, let's say in a cartoon, the very first Pink Panther movie in the 60s showed an animated opening with the Pink Panther. And literally after that, there was no animation because the Pink Panther was not an actual creature, it was a diamond. It was the subject of the entire movie. And they made a couple of other follow up sequels after that. And then you saw in the late 60s, early 70s, they developed a Pink Panther television show or cartoon. We had one in the 80s. They did a little bit of one in the 90s as well. So, how will Eddie Murphy work in that remake if that does come to fruition? It's going to be interesting anyway, right? We know he did very well. I liked the Nutty Professor. I can't help it. I thought that was pretty fun. I'm a sucker for all those things. I grew up on those Disney movies back in the day, whether it was the Shaggy Dog, whether it was the Love Bug, Herbie, the car that had a personality and could do all of those things, or whether it was something like let's see what else. Well, there was the Gnome Mobile. That's sort of a favorite of mine. You can find that online. But I watched all those movies growing up as a kid. So as they remake them now, I'm sort of like, oh, that's my childhood. Please don't mess that up. We'll see how it goes. I think Eddie Murphy can do a really good job as Inspector Clouseau. But again, if that were to come to pass, I think it would be just a complete straight slapstick comedy. I don't think there would be any other way that movie would be made. Um, so we'll see. He's in talks right now to reprise his donkey role as they're working with the main cast from the Shrek series to look at making a Shrek 5, which is why, if you look back at Puss in Boots, why it was so important that it do very, very well, because that kind of revitalized the Shrek franchise. And so now there's possibility, and I think it's a really good possibility that in the next 2 years or so, we'll probably get a Shrek 5 movie released. Again, it's just going to be a matter. I think they'll get the original cast back because honestly, what we've seen in animated series over the last year and a half is there's definitely money to be made. Speaking of money to be made, I cannot leave a Triple M broadcast without talking about Super Mario Brothers, which again, man, it just continues to rack up numbers. It's pushing $1.5 billion, which I think is probably about where it's going to top out at. What an amazing haul for an animated movie. And by the way, hats off to Chris Pratt, man. You've had the number one movie multiple times this year. You had Super Mario Brothers and you've had Guardians of the Galaxy. I would ask of you, and put this in the comments if you would, is there a more bankable star in Hollywood right now than Chris Pratt? Is there a more likable star in Hollywood overall than Chris Pratt? I don't know that there is, but Super Mario Brothers has done a fantastic job. One of the interesting things I think that probably could have sent Super Mario Brothers even further along is it was late opening in Japan. It was late opening in South Korea and some of those countries over there. And honestly, it didn't have the major haul that some people expected. Now, part of that is based on population. Japan by no means has the amount of population that the United States does. So if you have Demon Slayer, which is the highest grossing movie ever in Japan, it was 40 some odd $1 million. That doesn't seem like a whole lot over here. But over there, to have that many people go see it and accumulate that amount of money is massive for a movie franchise to do. Well, Mario Brothers is not going to hit that. But you know what they have done? They've absolutely assured there'll be a sequel. And I'm sure that sequel will do even better. And so not only do we expect that, but we pretty much opened up the Nintendo Cinematic Universe. Um, My sources keep telling me that there is a Zelda movie not being made. It's going to be made. It's already in pre-production with writing and such going on, and so I would suspect sooner rather than later that will probably be the next entry into the Nintendo Cinematic Universe. And from there, think about the things they could do. You could have a Metroid movie. Somebody asked me the other day about could they do Mega Man. I don't think so because I believe Mega Man is owned by another company. It's not actually owned by Nintendo proper. So that would take some finagling to do. But I've said this before on the show, and I absolutely mean it. I think they should aim for an in-game type movie where it's like Super Smash Bros. I think that would be fantastic. Again, that would take some time to get there. Let's let it be a slow build like we did with the Marvel franchises. But again, we'll see where they go. And the last thing that we're going to talk about this week in overtime is Tom Holland, who announced this week that he's been sober for a year. I want to say my hat's off to him, man. We know alcoholism is an addiction. It's destroyed a whole lot of lives, not just in Hollywood, not just in entertainment. We've seen musicians who have just not been able to kick it. So, for my man coming out and admitting that and working on it, man, we really do hope that you're able to stay healthy and get well. He's a great actor, but you know what? More than that, he's a human being. We need to be pulling for everybody to do the absolute best they can, support them in any way that we can. I hope his family and his friends are coming along beside of him, lifting him up, and letting him know that he has support there. So that's what we have for this week. Again, it's a shortened version of Midnight Magic Musings, but I did want to share a few things with you. Hope you enjoyed it. Go ahead again. Click like if you have not done so yet. If you would, subscribe if you have not done so yet. And share this thing out. Share it with the people that you love. Share it with people you don't like. It's okay. It doesn't hurt our feelings either way. And then do leave a comment. Do tell us something. If we said something that you agree with, by all means, let us know. The Earl often says, in honor of him, if you agree with me, say something. If you don't agree with me, say something. Now, unlike him, I will not go in the corner and cry as he promises to do. I just appreciate the dialogue. I appreciate the feedback that we receive from each and every one of you. So, on behalf of the Earl of Florida, again, under the weather, Earl, get better. Love you, man. We'll talk to you soon. On behalf of him, I am your humble host. I am the Lord Cephas. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Thank you for interacting. We do appreciate each and every one of you. And until next time, y'all take care. We'll see you soon.